Monday morning, the JT Show. Dave Hughes here, and joining us now, both live on the air and at supertalk.fm/watch. You can see him with your own two eyes. Chief of Police for Ridgeland and the president for 2021 of the Mississippi Police Chiefs Association, Chief John Neal, joins us. Chief, how you doing today?
Good morning, Dave. How are you? Everything's good here in Ridgeland.
I like it when you say things like that. And we want it to be good everywhere, but we do have a potential problem coming up, at least as near as I can tell, with the Initiative 65 process that's going to be on the ballot 2 weeks from tomorrow. And this is one aspect of it that I don't think has gotten enough attention, and that's the fact that if that goes in as it's written into the Constitution, this is going to turn into a nightmare for law enforcement, isn't it, Chief?
Absolutely. We met our summer conference down in Biloxi here just a couple of weeks ago, and we were able to give a presentation on this. And I was kind of shocked at the number of police chiefs out there who haven't had the opportunity to dig deep into this and read all the problems from the law enforcement side that we know we're going to have if 65 passes.
Well, and let's go over some of those because, drug enforcement is a big deal for many different reasons. We've talked about a lot of these things before. Marijuana, in some ways, is a gateway drug to other things. That's been claimed by a lot of people. But it is a problem in and of itself. What problems exactly are going to manifest themselves if 65 passes and this, as it's written, goes into the state constitution? What problems is this going to cause for you?
Well, just as you mentioned there, marijuana has been a gateway drug for many years. Anytime that we see offenders who are using strong opioids, heroin, cocaine, anything like that, when we talk to them, we usually find out that they experimented with marijuana at a very young age. Their system became a little bit more tolerant of it, and then they had to advance to something a little bit stronger. So certainly that's going to be one of the problems that we see here is that the advertising that will go into this, and young kids seeing billboards posted around town, they're going to think that this is something that's not harmful to them. They may try it. They may have a family member who is a legitimate patient, but it's going to grab some of grandmama's marijuana that she needs, and they're going to experiment with it. And then again, they're just going to step out and turn to a little bit more harder drugs to satisfy a habit that they've become addicted to.
And that's one thing that I don't think we can discount completely when you say going to get some of grandma's marijuana, which is a funny sentence in and of itself. But the amount that is allowed by Initiative 65 is not only going to make that possible, it's going to make it likely, I would think, because I don't know that grandma could smoke all that in a month, could she?
Well, no, when you're granted up to 5 ounces per month. And then when you've got caretakers who can come in under your ID card and purchase for you as well too, it just kind of multiplies the amount of marijuana that's going to be accessible out there to people outside those who really need it. And Dave, one thing that I want to make sure people understand is that law enforcement understands the need, and we've got the compassionate heart to where we think that there's something out there and that something needs to be done for these people who have these conditions. And if marijuana gives them relief in later days in life, then we certainly don't want to, make things too restrictive on them. But this is just a broad paintbrush that just puts a lot of means to get marijuana and very little regulation from the legislative end of it, the law enforcement end of it. It's just, this is just bad all over.
Well, and let me ask you this, because it's the medical marijuana initiative. It's been positioned that way. It's been talked about that way, all to do with medical uses. There's a lot of loopholes that lead to non-medical uses of marijuana in this thing, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. And there's no such thing as medical marijuana. There's marijuana that may be used for medical purposes, and that's what needs to be defined a little bit better than this initiative does it. Marijuana is still a controlled substance by federal law, and that's what we're tasked with doing, is enforcing the laws. And by passing this initiative, it takes it out of our hands to enforce a legally controlled substance.
Well, and I'm pretty sure if 65 passes, there will be a court battle over this. I have no doubt. And part of it is going to be because of that conflict, because like you said, there are federal laws in place. It's a Schedule I drug still. So that puts the state law, and in this case, if 65 passed, state constitution in direct conflict with federal law. As a law enforcement officer, in that situation, who wins when your men and women are out on the streets trying to enforce the law? Which one do they have to go by?
Well, because it's this constitutional amendment, that's what we've got to live by. And as bad as that would be, we don't make the rules. We just have to play by them. And this is certainly something that's going to make the law enforcement war on drugs much more difficult.
Well, and you guys, and I do know this, you guys not too long ago, just a couple of weeks back, I think, had a pretty major bust, which I'm going to be honest, in my opinion, looking at it from the outside in, wouldn't have been possible if 65 was in the Constitution.
Exactly right. If this violator had either a medical marijuana ID card or a caretaker card, all of this would have been legal. He had other than the amount, he was obviously over the 5 ounces, but what he had in his possession was a lot of edibles, which when you look at the packaging is marketed toward kids, nerd ropes and stuff such as that most adults don't eat or ingest, but they're marketed towards kids, and these products have a high level of THC in them. If they get in the wrong hands, then we're looking at adolescent overdoses.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think it leads to the confusion that we have the CBD products, and a lot of those are in gummies and those types of things, but they don't have the THC in them? Those are legal by state law. But is that going to lead to any confusion with people when they see it and they don't really know that there is a difference between the two? And this one's okay, so this one's got to be okay, right?
Well, and when you read the packaging, yes, there's going to be some difference on them, but who actually reads the labels on these products?
I never thought we would get to the point, Chief, to where we were discussing whether or not people would pay attention to the weed packaging.
Absolutely.
But that's where we are. That's where we are at, and that's to me a great example of what makes this so ludicrous to begin with. And don't get me wrong. Let's go back to something you said a minute ago. If there's a cancer patient, if there's an older patient, if there are people that can actually benefit from this, yes, let's figure out how to do that. But that doesn't seem to be the intent of this. This is going to lead to more confusion and problems, in my opinion, than it is solutions for people. And here's my question to you, Chief. Let's just play the what-if game here. And in 2 weeks, Initiative 65 passes, and it becomes a part of the Constitution, and that's it. We're done. Do you still get to do arrests for marijuana? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, we certainly would. And one thing that we would have to watch very, very closely is if it was to pass, we would be in constant contact with the Department of Health to see when the program kicks off, what the ID cards look like, and obviously if somebody's in possession of marijuana without that either caretaker card or patient card, then they're subject to an arrest. But you can obtain a fraudulent driver's license, easily right now. And what's going to happen, I think, is there's going to be a black market for caregiver cards and for patient cards as well, too.
Hadn't even thought about that. And again, this is not saying, and I'm just going to be right up front and honest, I am personally in favor of having this as an option for patients that really need it and can benefit from it. I am totally on board with that. This, to me, is just not the way to do it. And that's something I hadn't even thought about, was a black market in ID cards. But you're exactly right. We're going to see those things pop up as fakes everywhere. And then that adds even another layer of problems for law enforcement to deal with, because if you got somebody pulled over on the side of the road and you find 3 ounces of marijuana and they've got a card, now you've got to decide if it's a valid card or not. It's a whole different jungle that you got to wade your way through. Can you hang on through the break?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Fantastic. Chief John Neal, Ridgeland Police Chief, and the 2021 president of the Mississippi Police Chiefs Association. We're talking about marijuana and Initiative 65 coming up in just over 2 weeks on a ballot near you, and we'll continue that discussion next here on Super. Joining us on the air and at supertalk.fm/watch, the 2021 president of the Mississippi Police Chiefs Association and the police chief in Ridgeland himself, Chief John Neal. And Chief, you brought that up before the break about a black market in fake marijuana medical cards that I think you're right will blossom if this passes. We have a text from Jimmy in Tupelo on the C Spire text line. Says, as a bouncer in a bar, let me say it's hard to pick out some of these fake IDs. It'll be the same way for the medical marijuana cards when they fake them. What kind of process is there going to be to determine the validity of these things?
Well, that's a real good question, Dave. One thing that I've noticed in the initiative is that there's no way to get into the database to see who's a licensed card holder from either the caregiver or from the patient side of it, and that is problematic for law enforcement, obviously. And I don't know if there'll be a way through the Department of Public Safety that when you get a driver's license or a state issued ID card, that there's some kind of I don't want to call it an endorsement, but maybe it's some kind of marking on that card that lets you know that this is a authorized card holder.
True, but that wouldn't be a quick solution because, you've got people, if you just got your license renewed, you've got that same license for a while, and somewhere in that 4-year period, if suddenly you get a medical marijuana card, unless they require them to go update their license and get a new card, it's not going to show on there. So that's not a short-term solution, unfortunately. And if you can't get into the database, are you just going to have to look at it and just judge it visually and hope you're right as a law enforcement officer?
Right. And nobody knows exactly what the security features on these cards are going to be. So I see that being a real issue for us from the law enforcement side of it, is that we do encounter somebody who claims that they're a patient. Getting the validity of the card there on the side of the road at 3 o'clock in the morning is certainly going to cause us issues.
Well, and we know, you and I both know, Chief, what the argument is going to be, which is, well, no, that's medical information. You, thanks to HIPAA laws, you can't share that. You can't have access to that. So, no, that's not going to work. You're just going to have to take the card at face value, which is going to lead to a lot of problems. And let me ask you this, from your perspective as a police chief, is this going to lead to an uptick in marijuana-related problems in the general public, do you think?
Something that we won't know until we get into it, but let's go off of what history has shown us out in the states of Colorado and Oregon, and look at what's happened with those states. I've got a commander who traveled to Denver earlier this year and came back and was just appalled at the conditions out there, the homelessness that has arisen from this. He was riding down a interstate in Denver, and you could smell green marijuana as you ride down the road just from the warehouses that it was being stored in until it made it out to the treatment centers or pot shops.
And that's what it is. We've talked about this, and it raises some people's eyebrows, which is kind of the point. When we talk about these dispensaries and what's in Initiative 65, you could have those things popping up just about everywhere. There aren't really that many restrictions on where you can pop up a dispensary, and a dispensary in this case is going to be a pot shop, right?
That's all it is. You can call it whatever you want to, treatment center, whatever the language that they want to put in there, but that's all it is. It's a marijuana pot shop, and the zoning or lack of zoning that we're going to have with it will allow those to go just about anywhere. We talk about the regulation on liquor stores being 1,500 feet from schools, churches, and daycares. What you're going to do with these is this will be down to 500 feet. So just about any neighborhood, as you exit that, that's what's going to be sitting in front of you. We had a meeting this past week where a map of Ridgeland was shown to us, with all the different areas that these places could actually come up, and it is all over Ridgeland if this passes.
Well, and the one area I would think that it wouldn't affect, though, even with the medical marijuana card, even with the initiative going into the Constitution, if you're driving under the influence of marijuana, you're still going to be able to make an arrest for that, right?
Yes, sir. Obviously so. Just because you're a authorized user, for lack of better terms, that you still got to abide by some laws of the state of Mississippi. It's just the possession of it and obviously use of it in certain places that we'll be able to control.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you have instances in law enforcement where you catch somebody and you catch them because you find 3-4 ounces of marijuana, and that opens the door and you wind up finding everything else from stolen firearms to harder drugs to everything else, and it all started because of that simple possession of the marijuana charge? That happens sometimes, doesn't it?
Well, just like we said earlier, this is just a gateway drug, and so many recreational users out there now just don't think anything about smoking a joint, getting in a car and driving, or smoking a joint while you're driving a car. So this is going to open up that door to where people think it's okay now, where it's controlled and it's illegal. When it becomes legal, with a certain process to go through with your doctor and your ID card and all, it's going to just open up to a whole different world of troubles for law enforcement.
Well, it's let me ask you this. In your mind, in your world, is it a better, if you're in support of medical marijuana and you're going to vote yes on that first question no matter what, which one's the better option, 65 or 65A?
Oh, absolutely, 65A. I'm not in the legislature, but I do deal with a lot of them on a lot of different issues. I think this is something that has been kicked down the road for years. Marijuana will be legal in Mississippi at some point in time. I truly believe that. But I think that we've got to keep it in the hands of the legislature in developing laws that allow us to regulate it, allow those patients who do need it to have access to it. But it's got to be done right, and it's got to be done through a legislative process, not through a constitutional amendment that once it's in there, it is almost impossible to change.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. That's one of the big problems here. The legislature can set more reasonable possession amounts, more reasonable amounts that are received, more regulations on how it is administered and how it is safeguarded, for lack of a better term, and we won't wind up with the Department of Health having to check people's crops, which is basically what's going to happen with Initiative 65.
Yes, and also there's nothing in there that limits the THC level that they can put into this marijuana. So if you go to pick up some at your local shop, you're basically going in and shopping for lower grade, higher grade, whatever you can afford is what you're going to get. And if a patient needs marijuana for some type of chronic illness, then I think that doctors need to be able to, and I hate to use the word prescribe because again, there is no medical marijuana. Marijuana is a drug, and I think that needs to be regulated and controlled somehow instead of just this broad blanket of up to 5 ounces per month.
Well, and we have a lot of drugs that are administered by the medical community, and that to me is the best kept secret, if you will, aside from us who keep talking about it, and it really annoys some people. The fact that this is purporting to be a medical thing. We hear the words medical marijuana continuously, and dispensaries, and all the terminology is there to put it in a medical standpoint. But really, Initiative 65 this is recreational marijuana. We just don't realize it unless you read down through it and you read between the lines. That's the way I'm reading it anyway, Chief.
Right, and I'm gonna keep on hammering the fact that there is no medical marijuana. It's all marijuana, and I think that this is a way that we slowly start easing into the legalization of it, and I think that the people who pushed Initiative 65 played on the emotions of those people who had loved ones who really could have benefited from some type of relief late in life, and as they got signatures at the entrances to the malls and the entrances to high school football games, a lot of people who may have signed this early on didn't know what they were signing, didn't know what all the down and dirty was on this initiative.
I'm afraid you're probably right. Chief, we appreciate your time today, man, and keep doing the good work. That was a good bust a couple of weeks ago. Got a lot of nasty stuff off the street, so good job by you and your men and women there at the Ridgeland Police Department. Chief John Neal, we appreciate your time, and keep us up to date, and we'll check back with you after the election and see where we're going to be going from there. How about that?
Sounds good, Dave. I appreciate the time this morning.
Chief John Neal, we appreciate his time as well, and we will continue on the